Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm here with publishing expert Helen Francis, who also happens to be a tutor on the Ultimate Novel Writing course. My name's Kat. I work with Jericho Writers. So really excited to have you here with us today, Helen. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to get answering all of your questions. So if you have any questions about publishing, about your writing process, anything at all, just pop them into the comments and we'll do our best to get those answered for you. So Helen, thanks so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Very pleased to be here.
Oh, great. Would you mind just telling the audience just a little bit more about your background and your career so far?
Yeah, no problem. So I went to university and did a degree in English literature, and I've always been a kind of really avid reader and a really keen reader. And after I graduated, I went to university in Newcastle. I moved to London, and my first job was as assistant to a literary agent, and then I moved to Faber, where I was for about 9 years, working on fiction there, and then did various freelance things for a while, and also became international book scout, a freelance book editor, and then worked for Head of Zeus for a couple of years, commissioning literary fiction there. And I also, during that time, did a year at Penguin Random House at Vintage, running the classics department. So I've sort of done lots of different things, but mostly editing. I taught publishing and creative writing at Bath Spa University for 18 months. Yeah. So I've always kind of combined teaching and editing, and yeah, so that's me.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fascinating, your whole career, really. What kind of drew you into that line of work to start with? I mean, was it something you always kind of knew what you wanted to do even before university, or was it something you kind of found along the way? It was a real great passion of yours.
Yeah, well, my dad is a writer, a novelist and non-fiction writer, and he's retired now, but was also a university lecturer at Manchester University. And so I suppose I'd sort of grown up in quite a kind of bookish house, and I'd always kind of read. And actually, my elder brother is a literary agent too, and so we kind of, I mean, we sort of, his name's Will Francis. He's at Janklow and Nesbitt. And we, I don't know, it wasn't necessarily something that I was very conscious of deciding, but I was kind of aware, even at the point that I kind of went to uni, that, I was kind of curious about it. And during my university years, actually, I did some temping work. This is back in the days, because I'm old, when publishers needed audio typists, and I happened to be quite a good audio typer. So I moved to London for one of my summers and audio typed for PFD, who is a literary agency, and also for David Hyam, who's another literary agency. And that I stayed with a mate who was living in London, and so that kind of gave me a bit of a thirst for it. And it was always in the back of my mind. And
yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, I like the kind of link there, because PFD is actually our agency collaboration for the Ultimate Novel course next year, which is great. Which, in case you weren't aware, Helen is going to be a tutor on the course. So if you are interested, I'll pop the link in the chat for you after our talk. But yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess when you kind of got into it, did you find you had to work specifically within kind of like one type of genre? Was there much room for kind of flexibility? I know you've worked a lot in literary fiction, but did you find that there was like scope within the industry to move around, or was it something you're quite keen to kind of like stick along that path? Or
yeah, well, I mean, I suppose, so the first job I did was I was the assistant to an agent called Abner Stein, and Abner Stein is now no longer with us, sadly. He's dead, but his agency very much lives on, and he was the sort of secondary agent to huge kind of names in the American writers, essentially, sort of Jonathan Franzen, Dan Brown, Anne Tyler, and so on. And he was the kind of agent that would sell the books for them in the UK. So I had the kind of slightly strange experience of my first job in publishing being kind of a very intensive sort of sales job, dealing with incredibly impressive and really, brilliant writers. And then I moved from that to Faber, where my job as sort of editorial assistant at that time was, working with, incredible writers like Kazuo Ishiguro, and Peter Carey, and, all of these kind of names, DBCPM on the Booker, the first year I was there, and
wow.
it was kind of a real, So I suppose my trajectory has been that I've always kind of worked with literary fiction. But that said, I am particularly keen on kind of thriller writing and crime writing. And over the years, I've read all kinds of genres, and I'm really interested in all kinds of genres. I mean, genuinely am. So,
yeah. And is that something, I guess, kind of on the other side of the coin, would you recommend people writing, even though, they're quite set that they're going to be writing only crime novels, for example, but would you recommend that they also, read a wide range of different works?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that, reading as widely as you possibly can is incredibly helpful to your craft. And I also think that in terms of sort of thinking about the course specifically, having a group of, each of us have kind of 10 writers that we are the mentors of, and them all being encouraged to kind of read each other's work is really important, even if it's, if it's not your cup of tea, it's important.
I mean, I think it's so helpful, I guess, just to kind of have that feedback from someone who maybe isn't, thinking about things in the same way you might be. And then it kind of, helps you to see things from a new perspective, I guess. So, that's really great.
Also, I mean, I think it's, it's a bit of a truism, and you get these kind of creative writing truisms, but the idea that every novel is essentially a crime novel, I think, is something that does hold some merit and hold some water, in the sense that every novel is a novel where something happens and there's a mystery to be solved. Now, with a crime novel, it's very obvious what that is. With something else, it might be a sort of psychological problem that's to be solved, or it might be a kind of personal problem that's to be solved. I think that there is crossover with that.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I'd never thought of it in that way, but it's so true. There's always that kind of problem and then like resolution needed, which essentially is what, is a crime novel. It's very, base level. So that's really interesting. It would be kind of, I guess good to kind of know then. So, throughout your experience, you've had such a, wide range of experience, and you must have read so many different pieces of work, ranging from people right at the very beginning of their careers to, very well-established authors. But is there kind of, can you put your finger on any kind of things in those pieces of writing that have, always, I guess, guaranteed that it will pull you in? Is there something that you particularly look for when you're reading a new piece of work, regardless of where it's come from?
I mean, I know it's unhelpful for me to say no, but the answer is kind of, it's just, it just depends. It can be just a really beautifully written first page. It can be a first page that knocks your socks off. I published, when I was at Faber, a writer called Helen Fitzgerald, she's now gone on to write 8 or 9 novels, and one of her novels, The Cry, was made into a BBC crime series. But her first novel, Dead Lovely, which we're going back, 20 years or something, I read, and it just had the most kind of astonishing first page. Like, it just kind of really knocked your socks off first page. But that said, Helen writes a kind of very particular, I love her books, a very particular kind of novel, and it wouldn't work for every writer. So I think, I hope that during my publishing career, I've always had the patience to read a couple of pages of the book. You have to just trust that people are going to do that. You can try and write a really bombastic first paragraph, whatever, but it has to be fitting with what you're doing. And, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I think what I have always been looking for is just writing that makes me sit up and take notice.
Yeah. And it's kind of, I guess it's sometimes a bit of an intangible, thing, what that can be. Like you said, it can be different for every single writer and every single piece of work. So it's, it must be so interesting when you come across something that kind of, it has that moment, like for the first time, and it's quite a magical thing, really. I guess it's, sorry to kind of go on the same vein, but like when you're working with new authors, is there anything, I guess, because I know you've worked quite extensively as like a book doctor as well as an editor, and can you tell if there's a book that has potential straight away, or is it something you think you need to work quite closely with the author on to be able to get to that point, or is it something you've seen like quite instantly in your experience?
I think that I can sometimes see from the very beginning that something really has legs to stand on, and that the writing is interesting and the story is interesting, and it may need some work, it may need some polishing, but that there's something there. And I think it does sort of depend. It does sort of it is sort of variable. I mean, there's this anecdote that is very widely known about Lord of the Flies, which was published by Faber, which was that the first chapter of it was terrible, and so it had been on every slush pile in every publisher's slush pile. And Charles Monteith, who was the editor-in-chief at Faber at the time, was bored on a train journey, and he picked it up and realised that the first chapter was awful, and if you scrap that, the book was a work of art. And so I suppose I think that it openings are tough. They are tough. It's good to get some advice on them. And you don't necessarily get the best impression of a book from an opening. Occasionally you do, but I suppose in general I would say that I do get a feel for things, I think, quite quickly.
And I guess kind of also in that sense, just going back to the kind of openings are hard point, it must be so helpful to kind of, for writers, especially in the early stages of their career, to get that kind of outside feedback before they even show it to an agent or try and send it off. Which is something. Hi everyone, if you're just joining us, thank you for being here today with our live Q&A with publishing expert Helen Francis. If you do have any questions, please drop them into the comments. I've just seen we've got one through, so we'll get onto that in a second. But Helen is also a tutor on our ultimate novel writing course. So if you're interested in the course at all, I'll drop the link into the comments after our chat, so you can go and check it out. So we've got a question here from Paradise Garden. They have asked, can someone use the setting of London who have never travelled there? And I guess that raises quite an interesting debate, which, seems quite, rife in the publishing industry at the moment, down to, can you write from an experience that is not your own? Is it right to? And do you think authors, have that kind of, I guess, license to, really?
I think they really do. And I worry a little bit about the kind of the question at the moment of it. Of course, it's important. I'm very aware of the danger of sort of cultural appropriality and of making assumptions about things that you don't know anything about. But I also think that it's crucial to fiction that people imagine themselves to be people that they aren't, and to live in places that they don't, and to have sexualities that they don't have, or to have experiences that they don't have. And I think it would be a shame for that to be squashed. Of course, there's sensitivity to be had, and it's it's a complicated question.
It is.
But are you allowed to pretend that you're a taxi driver if you've never driven a taxi? I would argue that yes, you are. And are you allowed to say that you're allowed to kind of research London and set a character's perspective from London if you've never been to London? Well, yeah, I'd say that of course you are. Research is important, but why shouldn't you?
So I guess, if you were looking to do that, like you said, it's important to kind of to do your kind of, research into that, and just make sure you've got kind of all the facts straight, as it were. If it's
also, I think it's a kind of interesting question generally about setting. Does it?
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of writers will set something in a particular city, but will change the geography to suit their novel. Now, you could argue that that's, is that allowed? I would say it is allowed. If you're kind of like, oh God, this novel is definitely set in Edinburgh, but that hotel really needs to be near to the station, and I don't know quite how to go about it. I think you're allowed to pretend that that's the case. I would argue.
Yeah, if it's helping the story to move along, I think it's always something, to pursue. I just think there's so much nowadays where I guess you are creating worlds within, your book, even if it is, going to be quite true to life. I think there's always that, room for imagination as well, which is one of the fantastic things about writing. So I guess just kind of, you've also worked with so many writers throughout their careers. What is it you enjoy most about mentoring other authors and helping them in their journeys?
I always say, and I know it may not be music to writers' ears, but I always say that part of the mentoring process is a kind of psychoanalysis process too, because I think that you're working with someone on their book, and everyone's book is kind of intense to them and comes from probably quite often personal experiences, or if it doesn't come from personal experiences, from great leaps of the imagination, which are in any case quite personal. And so the experience for me is meeting people that I don't know at all on quite an intense level. And that is is really enjoyable. And and talking about writing, talking about what's going on in terms of their books, talking about kind of the world of literature as a whole, and talking about publishing, all of that comes into it. And
Yeah, for sure. I think it's something as well. I guess, admire writers who are able to kind of bare their souls in that way. It's such a personal reveal, I think, and I think sometimes it feels, fairly daunting to just take that first step and show other people your work, especially if you don't think it's ready yet. But I think it's such an crucial part of because a lot of writers, we might be writing in isolation, but not necessarily hiding our work from the world. We want other people to see, we want other people to read it. So I guess it's important to be able to take that first step, but it's also terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really important to take that first step. It's really important to show other people your work. Don't be embarrassed. Like, it doesn't, just show it. It doesn't matter. And actually, what I've found, over the years of teaching at the Ultimate Novel Writing course is just how often the students on the course say to me, the single thing I found most useful about this is showing my work to other writers and them commenting and commenting back, and just how much they gain out of that. It really is important.
Yeah, I know you've said to me before that your mentor group from the past course have formed really close bonds, which is so wonderful to hear. And how you've even gone for dinners together, and they've really created this really close network and writing community, which is really fantastic. And so a testament to you as a tutor, and just wonderful to hear that.
But they just the 10 of them have formed a WhatsApp group, and they talk frequently, and also the other thing that I was mentioning before we went live is what I think is quite nice about the course is that you can dip in as much or as little as you want. There's a community there if you really want to get involved, and absolutely we encourage it. If you're busy with life and work and etc., and you really feel that you can only kind of dip your toe in from time to time, that's fine as well. And I think that kind of flexibility is worth kind of noting.
Yeah, it's kind of, hopefully it's a course that you can that will fit with your needs, as it were.
Yeah.
And,
and there may be months when you're really kind of, full on with it, and other months when you just don't have, the time. And yeah. I think it works in either of those scenarios.
Yeah, I hope so. What drew you to joining us as a tutor on the course? Obviously, we're so thrilled to have you, and this will be your 3rd year going into it now.
Yes.
Yeah. Where's the time gone?
As I was sort of saying earlier, I really enjoy working with writers one-to-one in their books. When I was in-house at Faber and in-house at Head of Zeus, and when I've been a sort of freelance commissioning editor for other smaller presses, the experience that I enjoy most is talking to writers about their books and helping to improve them, I hope. And so and helping people at the beginning of the process is really satisfying.
Yeah, and I think the students also really appreciate just having that guidance. I think it's something that's just really just valuable in those early stages, because I think it is usually quite an isolated process, writing. And, at times it does have to be, but then there's definitely times when it's really beneficial to have that, support around you. So that's what, we're hoping to kind of like bring with the Ultimate Novel Writing course, really, is that, level of support and encouragement to really help, writers to achieve their potential. So yeah.
And it's a very kind of all-consuming course, as I say. There's there your fellow students, there's your tutor, me, or one of my fellow tutors. There's also the Jericho team. There's a lot of stuff on the website that's incredibly handy. There's a lot of material and a lot to be sort of gained from it.
Oh, fantastic. What stage do writers have to be before they apply to the course, do you think? I know we get applications from, very rough first drafts to people with nearly completed manuscripts. So what would you recommend?
Again, I know it sounds like a woolly response, but I think it's almost a kind of personal thing. I think you need to, if you feel like you've been working on it and you just can't see the wood for the trees and you feel like you need help, then that's the point to apply. And it could be that that's the point at which, you've got a full manuscript that you've actually edited a couple of times yourself, or it could be that all you've got is 10,000 words, but you just need a steer in the right direction. I know that's not a particularly helpful response, but I think you just have to sort of trust your instinct a little bit with that,
completely.
Go with what you feel.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I think it's, it's a personal decision at the end of the day, and we've got all the information on the website.
You have to just trust your instinct a little bit. Like if you think, I honestly just need some help with this. Like I can't quite see it. Then that's the moment.
Yeah, and it's. I think it's something. I think quite a few writers maybe sometimes wish, maybe not necessarily in the course format, but wish they'd gone to a mentor sooner, so you could kind of, get that feedback at the beginning instead of having to then go back at the end after, several rounds of edits and then make all these like simple changes that, hadn't arisen until it's quite late on. So I think in that respect, like just having a mentor and having that, feedback is so helpful at the beginning as well.
I agree. And I think, as I say, I think it's personal, but I think that not being afraid to apply, even if you feel like you're quite an early stage, is important, because we go kind of instinctively with the writing, and it doesn't matter if all you've got is 5,000 words if it looks then
and you also work with quite a wide range of genres within your group. They're all writing something different, aren't they? So it must be really, I guess, interesting to kind of like delve into those different projects and see how they interact with one another too.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the most pleasurable things, I mean, when I was a commissioning editor in-house at various publishers, I had a very specific doctrine of what I was supposed to be publishing. And when I work with writers on the course, I have young adult writers, fantasy writers, science fiction writers, literary novelists, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy that variety. So.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I'm also just curious, to know a little bit more about your experience as a book scout. So what exactly did that entail? Because
well, I mean, I always feel like, book scouting is one of these things that's impossible to describe to people because it's really complicated. It just, so it's essentially, how to describe it. If you're an editor in Italy or France or Germany and you want to know what's published in translation in your territories, then you hire a book scout on a freelance basis to tell you what's hot, in inverted commas, in the UK. And so it doesn't really concern writers that haven't been published yet. It tends to be writers that either have been published or whose book, has just gone out on submission in the UK and there's a bit of buzz around them and everyone's like, oh, there's an interesting new thriller writer out there. And then, your job as the scout is to say to your German editor, even though everyone's making a lot of noise about this, I'm not quite sure, or the opposite, everyone's going for this, you should too, it's brilliant. So it's kind of it's the sort of, the kind of fast-paced, I suppose, area of publishing and kind of, so not something to worry about too much if you're still in the early stages of your career, but worth knowing about if you're
definitely, and an interesting line of work. Like, nonetheless, it's something that I was always quite curious about, as to also at what point does the translate. So I'm assuming the translation of the book happens after the book scouts kind of kind of recommendation.
And it's an interesting world because of course, particularly in Germany, which is a huge market, a lot of what they do is translate UK-based or American-based writers into German, and so there's a lot of translators. Translators are notoriously not paid particularly good money, but German publishers, but publishers will pay quite a lot of money for those books, and it's a big market.
That's so interesting. Well, thank you so much again. I think we're coming to the end of our talk, but hopefully I can just ask you one more question before we go. So everyone who's watching, if you've just joined us and you didn't know, Helen is going to be tutoring on our ultimate novel writing course starting in October. If you're interested to learn more about that, I'll be popping the link in the chats. If you have just joined us recently, please do go back and watch the conversation in full. I promise you'll learn a lot. I certainly have. So Helen, we're getting applications coming in for the course now. What would make an application stand out for you? What are you looking for for someone to join your mentor group as a student?
I know I feel like I'm repeating myself a bit boringly, but to be honest, it's kind of diversity. I like a kind of eclectic group of people. I like people that are passionate about writing and are absorbed by writing and for whom it means a lot to do it. And, other than that, it's kind of a little bit of, je ne sais quoi, and kind of, just sort of having an instinct with it. But in terms of applications, I think just, being willing to kind of join us for a year and go for it, I would say, really go for it.
Yeah. And just kind of, I guess, like you said before, just trust your instincts and
trust your instincts.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much again. So I'll also pop the links to Helen's social channels in the chat as well. So please do go and follow her. And like I said, she'll be tutoring on our ultimate novel writing course. So please do go to our website to learn more about the course and send in your application to Helen if that's something that feels right for you to do. Like we said, trust your instincts and just go for it, because I think, it's definitely something that I think has benefited a lot of writers and hopefully will help you in your journey as well. So thank you again so much, Helen.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you again here soon. So have lovely evenings, everybody.